The son's silence. My teenage son stopped speaking the night his father left. Not just fewer words, not sulking silence, not the performative quiet teenagers wear when they want to punish you in public. No, real silence, full bodied and private. He shut his mouth gently like closing a book and set it on an invisible shelf. And from that night on, he lived inside the blank space where his words used to be. He was 16. His name is Noah. People assume silence is empty. It isn't. It's crowded. It's the scrape of chair legs you never noticed before, the hum of the refrigerator cutting through dawn, the geometry of dust floating in sunlight, the way your own breath sounds like betrayal. It's a chorus of everything you can't say and every sound you have to stand in for. The morning after his father, my husband Mark, disappeared, I made coffee and poured it into the mug that said, "World's okayest mom," and the handle trembled in my hand. I set it down, steadied it against the counter with both palms, and waited for the familiar rhythm of our life to find me. It didn't. The house felt like a room after a party, confetti of memory stuck to every surface. There was a half-folded pile of laundry on the sofa where Mark had been sitting when he said, without looking at me, "I need some air." He didn't come back. I walked down the hall to Noah's room and knocked. He opened it at once, which startled me. Teenagers never open doors at once. His hair stuck up like he'd been electrocuted by dreams. He looked either very young or very old. His mouth was neutral, and his eyes were full. "Hey," I said lightly. "Want breakfast?" He nodded. We sat across from each other at the kitchen island, and I was suddenly aware of all the quiet things. The crunch of toast, the tick of the wall clock, the sound of every swallow. I told him that his father hadn't come home, that I'd already called, that it was probably nothing, that we should go to school and work anyway, because routine helps. This is what the books say. Establish normalcy, keep structure. He nodded again. He ate with the slow precision he'd always had, pulling his toast apart in perfect halves. When he finished, he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, like a much younger boy, something he hadn't done in years, and got up to put his dish in the sink. He turned on the water. He washed the plate, his shoulders narrow, but set, his movements careful. "Noah," I tried again, a sound I threw into a deep well. "We'll hear from him." He probably just... I didn't have an end to that sentence. Needed to think. He turned off the water. He stayed very still for a moment. He looked at me as if I had said something oddly complicated, in a language he almost, but not quite, remembered. And then he nodded for the third time and left for school without a word. I didn't understand then that he had given me the last of his words. I thought he was being a teenager, as if the air had a setting called moody, and he had simply cranked the dial. But the day became 2 and 2 became 5, and the calendar dragged its heavy body forward. And still, he didn't speak. We filed a missing person report on a Tuesday, which is a stupid day to do something that dramatic. Tuesdays don't have the dignity of Mondays or the panicked urgency of Fridays. They are poor, plain days, and putting something so loud on a Tuesday felt like dressing grief in pajamas. The officer who came to the house had a beard he kept rubbing, as if his face were an idea he was trying to remember. He wrote down Mark's height, weight, hair color, the car he drove, the route he usually took home from the architecture firm where he kept strangling the word partner until it died in his mouth. He asked if there had been an argument. I said no. He asked if there had been unusual stress. I said we were a family of 2 full-time jobs, 1 mortgage, 1 elderly dog, and a teenager. We were marinated in stress like any other family in a city that eats you by inches. When the officer asked if Mark had taken clothes or his passport, I said no, not that I could see. His shoes sat in their usual line by the back door. 4 pairs in a Mark parade, sneakers, loafers, boots, flip-flops. He'd left with the flip-flops. It had been warm. A soft night like a hand on your cheek. The officer's pen hovered over the paper. Any chance he wanted to leave? He asked gently, and he looked at me in the way people look at mothers when they think you are a curated gallery of denial. I think he wanted to breathe, I said, and I think he wanted to come back. He wrote that down. He shook my hand, twice, too hard both times, and told me I'd done the right thing. He left his card and took a copy of a photograph I handed him without thinking. Mark and me, standing in front of the ocean, the kind of photo you take not because it's good, but because you're there. The sky, a shallow bowl, the water, a sheet. The 2 of us squinting into a future we assumed would behave itself. I didn't tell the officer that Noah had stopped speaking. It felt like giving away something that wasn't mine. The first week is a circle. You move through it feeling like you people. The same rooms, sit in the same chairs, touch the same mugs. But the rooms, chairs, and mugs no longer recognize you. The phone rings. You jump. It's not him. You jump anyway, repeatedly, like a conditioned dog. You learn to hate your own reflexes. People bring food, like grief is a potluck you can satisfy with lasagnas. I smiled, and I thanked them, and arranged the aluminum pans in the fridge like military units, and 8 bites cold in the middle of the night. Fork, standing upright in baked ziti, and steam, fogging my glasses. Noah did his homework. He did his chores. He went to school. He came home. He stood taller when we passed each other. He became a sketched version of the boy he'd been, outline only. I reached for outer edges. "Want to go for a walk?" I said. He shook his head. "Movie?" Shake. "Read on the couch?" He hesitated, then nodded. He lay with his head in my lap the way he used to when he was small. Our old position like a song we had both forgotten and suddenly remembered. I thought maybe this was language too, this weight, this trust of neck and skull. I ran my fingers through his hair and watched the ceiling until the ceiling blurred, and if I cried carefully, tears hiding in my hairline. Grief is a courteous guest at first, trying not to take up too much space. At school, they called. The guidance counselor used her voice like a cushion she applied to the corners of sentences to soften them. She said that sudden silence in teenagers can be a symptom of trauma. I told her that I had already scheduled a therapist, Dr. Levin, a woman with silver hair who wore linen and sat in her chair as if stillness were an art, and that we had an appointment on Friday. The counselor said that was good. She said good 3 times. It made me want to say something savage. Instead, I said thank you. Twice. The math of polite is ridiculous. As a parent of 3, I want to take a moment to tell everyone about parenting simply. Tired of chaos at home? Unlock simple, practical parenting tips to create a calm and loving vibe. Since 2010, parenting, Simply has been your community for connecting with your kids and mastering easy skills to transform your home. Our mission: slash stress for parents and kids with powerful communication and organizational hacks. Say goodbye to doom and gloom. Parenting can be fun, joyful, and fulfilling. You've got what it takes to be an amazing, loving parent, and we'll show you how. Click the link below for stress-free parenting tools and join our community. Dr. Levin asked Noah to write if he couldn't speak. He didn't pick up the pen. She offered him a small basket of objects to fidget with: a smooth rock, a wooden cube with magnets, a string of wooden beads. He turned the rock over in his palm and set it down, picked up the beads, and let them fall, clicked the magnets against each other with a soft, metallic kiss. She didn't push. She asked me about our home, our routines. I wanted to impress her with my capacity. It's horrible, but there's a part of you that wants to be graded well in trauma, to perform competence for the judges in your head. Where were you when your husband left? She asked. In the kitchen, I said. He said he needed air. I went to the sink and ran the water. I thought, give him his air. Then 10 minutes later, 20, an hour, I went outside. The backyard looked back at me like I had asked the wrong question. Had he done that before? Gone out for air? Yes, not like this. Were you worried? Of course, but I also felt a strange relief. My eyes widened like I had said a curse. It's not pretty to admit the ways you're a bad wife. Relief from what? I couldn't tell you exactly. I just know that when someone is in pain long enough, you start building walls in your chest to breathe around them. Sometimes, when the source of the pain leaves, even for an hour, you breathe differently. That's not a confession, she said gently. That's the biology of surviving. Noah's eyes flicked to me, quick as a bird. Sometimes I was certain he didn't want my truth in the room. Sometimes I thought he was starving for it. Navigating motherhood is like steering a ship in fog. Bell in your hand, guessing where the shore is by the echo. We went home, and I made soup, and he ate it, and we watched a baseball game muted, and the announcer's face became a punctuation mark in air, all mouth and no sound. The silence inside us and the silence on the screen canceled each other out to create something like rest. 6 days passed, then 7, then 20. The police called to say they had found nothing. His car hadn't turned up anywhere. His credit cards hadn't been used. His phone was off. If he had wanted to disappear, he had done it well. If he hadn't, then the world had eaten him. And the world is a creature that swallows without blinking. We discussed the possibility of death because you have to. My tongue touched the word and recoiled. I watched Noah for any flinch, any tremor. He stared at the coffee table as if he could will the wood to look back. His silence grew into our third person at the table. In the weeks that followed, I found odd little absences. The way you find you're missing one socket wrench from a set. The way the top of the jam has been smoothed, and you know someone else has been in your kitchen. Mark had taken very little, but the little pulsed with intention. His brass drafting compass, the car title, a folder from the gray file cabinet in the bedroom we called the not nice drawer, where we kept the things that ruined dinners. The file was labeled Documents, Personal, Helpfully Unhelpful. I found a receipt for gas in the trash from a station near the marina. I found that the canister with our emergency cash, $200 we kept under the sink behind the vinegar, and an ancient box of borax, held a single 20 now. I found that the dog, Biscuit, spent long minutes sitting at the back door in the evenings, not whining, not scratching, just facing that rectangle of glass with the patience of a monk. Noah started staying up late. I would find him at the dining table drawing quietly, mechanical pencil skating over paper. His lines were careful enough to be architecture, his father's hand in his. Sometimes he drew rooms we'd stood in. Sometimes he drew rooms I didn't recognize but wanted to live in. Sometimes he drew maps that were almost maps, and then weren't. I put myself to work. I organized drawers, something I've done in grief since my mother died when I was 28 and pregnant with Noah. Sorting gives the illusion of control. I found our marriage certificate tucked into a folder called Happy Things, birth announcements, vacation postcards, Noah's first crayon scribble. I held the certificate like a towel pulled from the back of a closet that still smelled like the summer it had lived through. Sun and salt. We'd married in a small ceremony under a huge fig tree. Our vows handwritten because we believed in ourselves then. In the photograph, me, Mark, the fig tree like a hand splayed against the sky. We both looked the way you look when the future hasn't yet taught you its grammar. Friends came, and then they came less, because grief is a season, and most people give you a 2-week weather forecast. My sister, Ruby, came and brought me clothes with elastic waistbands because she believes in practical mercy. She touched Noah's shoulder with a hand that knows how to land, light and sure. "Hey, kid," she said softly, and he nodded, the nod that had become our currency. At night, sometimes, I went into our bedroom and lay on the floor with my ear pressed to the wood, as if the house could whisper back what I didn't know. Houses remember the weight of the people they shelter. The floor felt blankly polite under me. I thought of Mark's shoes, lined up like ducks by the door. I thought of the flip-flops that had gone walking. I thought of the way he had sat in his chair that last night, not touching his glass of water, the condensation making a clear ring on the coffee table like a planet marking its orbit. On the 37th day, numbers mattered. I kept them. I found a burner phone in the pocket of an old jacket in the hall closet. It rang against my hip when I moved the coat, a little chirp like a synthetic bird. I held it in my palm and felt the heat of something that had been hidden, finally meeting air. A text lit the screen. Slip 11, 2 a.m. I stared at it long enough that my eyes watered, then wiped my eyes with the heel of my hand and carried the phone to Noah, who sat cross-legged on his bed with a pair of headphones around his neck, not listening to anything with them. As if silence, too, needs cushioning. I held the screen out. "Do you know what this is?" He looked, and something passed over his face. Fear? Relief? Familiarity? He closed his eyes, and when he opened them, he shook his head just slightly. A lie shaken loose, a truth refused. I didn't press. The word slipped into my mouth and hung there like a bead. Slip. As in paper, as in mistake, as in a place where you tie a boat to the world and pray it holds. The marina was 20 minutes away. I didn't go that night. I didn't go the next. I waited 3 days because even terror obeys superstition. On the 4th night, after Noah went to sleep, I put on my running shoes and a jacket, palmed the burner phone and my keys, and drove to the water. Marinas at night are a specific kind of quiet. The air salted, the masts clinking the long sigh of rope against wood. I walked past boats with names like Second Chance and Serendipity and Tide and Seek, slip numbers painted on posts. I counted under my breath. At 11, I stopped. The boat in slip 11 was small. Not a yacht, not a dinghy. A real boat with a small cabin. Big enough to carry you out of sight and small enough to convince you you were still a person. The name on the stern was Bluebird, the paint worn, the letters patient. Someone had loved this boat once and then done their best to keep loving it. I stood on the dock and listened. The little lapping noises water makes when it wants you to be braver than you are. The sound of my own soft sneakers. I didn't know what I was looking for, something huge, a sign from the sky, a transformation. Instead, the boat sat there, like a man who has been waiting for hours and has made peace with being stood up. I didn't see anyone. I wasn't even sure what time it was. I was too busy counting my heartbeats like a misbehaving metronome. I leaned down and touched the rope's knot with my fingers, as if it could bless me. I didn't mean to speak, but I did. "Mark?" I whispered. The dock took my whisper and kept it. I went home. I lay awake for hours with my stomach a hard bowl. Days accumulated like laundry. The police had no news. Dr. Levin told us that sometimes trauma wraps its hands around the throat. She said we shouldn't try to pry it off. We should ask it gently what it needs to let go. I asked. Noah didn't answer. But he watched me the way the dog watched the door, as if he knew things were coming, and we needed to be ready. In the 4th month, my paycheck hit the account and slid out again into bills, leaving that thin line of money that is both survival and humiliation. I sold the extra car, the one that had been for weekends and dreams. I canceled the streaming services. I learned to make big pots of beans the way my grandmother used to. The dog's vet agreed to a payment plan. Every practical solution felt like voting for a future I didn't know the shape of. People kept inviting us to events, a birthday party, a graduation, church, and each time I thought, this is the day it changes. This is where life notices I am carrying it in both hands and gives me a place to set it down. But grief has no respect for people's calendars. It shows up to the party wearing your shoes and eats the cake. On the 102nd day, the school called to tell me Noah had gotten into a fight. The word fight isn't big enough for the scene I walked into. A hallway that smelled of disinfectant and temper. 2 boys breathing hard, the principal with her hair slightly askew. A trumpet case in a corner like an orphan. Noah's knuckles were red. The other boy's lip bled. I opened my mouth to say his name and closed it again, because it felt like calling a bird already startled. "These things happen," the principal said, the way people say things they don't believe while holding them at arm's length. I'm more concerned about the change we've seen since his father. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The unfinished thing hung between us, heavy and shining like a chandelier that might choose to fall. I asked Noah if he wanted a ride home or if he wanted to walk. He stared at the floor and picked up the trumpet case, though he doesn't play trumpet. He carried it like a fact, like a weight he'd chosen to prove he could. We walked out into a thin winter sun that made everyone look like they had been erased and redrawn. That night, he pulled an old chessboard out of the hall closet. He set it on the coffee table, the pieces careful in their little compartments, kings and queens in habitual royal sleep. He placed the board between us. He moved a pawn. I moved mine. He moved another. We played without speaking, and the house felt, for the first time since that night, like a place again. Not a theater where I was both audience and performer. He beat me ruthlessly, and halfway through, he smiled, brief and sideways. The smile he had when he was 7 and beat me at Connect 4 and realized adults can lose. We played 3 games. He won twice. I won once by accident. He let me. I let him let me. Love is a series of permissions. After the 3rd game, he stood and looked toward the hall, as if hearing something I hadn't yet learned to hear. "Noah," I said. He opened his mouth. His jaw moved as if the muscles had forgotten their choreography. He closed it again. He walked down the hall, and I sat in the living room with my hands clasped like I was praying, though I was only counting time. On the 169th day, during a rain that made the city's shoulders softer, he spoke. It was evening. We had both been in our separate rooms, the house breathing the way houses do when everyone is home and quiet. The rain thudded against the windows in fat, generous drops. The dog lay on the mat by the back door as if guarding the weather. I went into the kitchen to make tea and reached into the cabinet for the jar of honey. The label had peeled halfway and the letters read H-O-Y. I thought, weirdly, of my wedding vows. I promised to stay curious about your grief. We had written those words and had no idea how to conjugate them. Noah walked in. His hair was damp. He held a folded piece of paper in his hand, folded and refolded so many times the creases were white. I smiled the way you smile at a deer on your lawn, small, still, grateful you got this close. "Tea?" I asked. He set the paper on the table and slid it toward me with one finger, not looking away. His eyes held the kind of gravity that pulls things into its orbit. Ash, birds, small moons. I put the jar down. I unfolded the paper. It was a drawing of a boat. The boat was precise and loving. Each line of the hull clean, the name on the stern rendered in careful block letters. Bluebird. The dock was there. The rope, the cleat tied perfectly, the water making little lines of laughter around it. And there, above the boat, he'd drawn a hand. Big, unmistakably adult, holding up 2 fingers. A peace sign, or a number 2, or a sign in a language I didn't speak. And he did. "Noah," I said. He looked at the kettle as if it could help. He put his hand on the counter, flat. He lifted it, pinched the bridge of his nose, a child's gesture, in a growing face. He swallowed. He licked his lips. He opened his mouth. "Bluebird," he said. Just one word. The kettle clicked off. The house stopped breathing for a heartbeat. The rain leaned in to listen. The word hit me in the chest like a door slamming open. For a second, I expected more. A sentence, a paragraph, a flood. But the single word was everything. It held an address, a confession, a map, a secret. He looked at me with a question behind his eyes. "Now?" I nodded. "Now." We drove in the rain, wipers doing their sad duet, the dog whining softly in the back because he hates being left behind when we're electric like this. We parked crooked in the lot. The marina at night again, ropes and reflected lights, and the smell of cold salt that always makes me think of beginnings. We walked fast, then slower, as the numbers on the slips asserted their authority. Slip 9, 10, 11. The boat was there, patient, as if boats can learn patience from waiting on water. The rain ran lines down its paint. The deck was wet and promised to throw me if it could. I put one foot on it. The wood moved under me, alive in that way that makes you remember everything you've ever trusted that could have failed you and didn't. You waited for me, I whispered to it, because I'm a woman who talks to boats now. Grief makes you bilingual. Noah stepped onto the deck after me, arms out just slightly, balancing. He moved with the confidence of someone who had done this before. He took my hand lightly, not a child's clutch, an invitation to steady each other, and led me toward the little cabin door. It was unlocked. We went inside, and I smelled coffee. The cabin was neat the way someone who isn't a neat person has made it neat because they want to be invited to a life. A small cot with a gray blanket, a table with a battered deck of cards, a lamp with its shade dented as if someone had hit it once and then apologized. On a hook, a blue slicker. On the counter, a French press, still wet. Noah, I said. But the way you say someone's name when you're really saying, how long have you been keeping this, and what has it done to you? He moved ahead of me and touched the slicker with his fingertips. He put out his hand in that two-finger sign he'd drawn, not to me, but to an idea of the air in the cabin, as if telling it, us, two things, two people, two truths. Behind the slicker, on another hook, hung a set of keys with a bright red float. A keychain from a seaside diner with a seagull printed on the plastic. I knew that diner. We'd taken Noah there after his first baseball game, Mark, teaching him how to blow the wrapper off a straw. Noah took the keys off the hook and set them on the table. He did it with ceremony, and I recognized the seriousness of a ritual. He stepped back and looked at me. He opened his mouth again. His voice was rusty, like a gate that hasn't been used much. He made me promise, he said. The words came out halting but there. He looked at me, and his eyes filled quickly, spill, and then steady. He said, don't tell Mom. He said, just until it's safe. He said, he'd fix it. He said, don't talk. I reached for the table because the floor moved under me. Boats are unforgiving with emotion. They remind you that the ground is never promised. When? I asked softly. The night he left. He put fingers around the word, like you do with a glass that might break. He took me here. He said we were getting air. He said it was a joke, like an adventure. He said we were going to sleep on a boat. And did you? He shook his head. He left me here. He said I should go home before you woke up. He said, tell Mom we went for a drive. He said, don't tell her about the boat. Don't tell her about the money. Don't tell her about... He stopped. He put a hand to his throat and pressed, as if closing a hatch. The money? I said. The word sounded too small for the fear it held. What money? He squeezed his eyes shut, as if pulling memory through a small space. He opened them again, with effort. He said he owed people. He said he'd fix it. He said he'd be back after he made it. Right, he said. Tell them what they want to hear if they ask. He said, don't talk to the police. He said, if I stay quiet, everything will be okay. The rain tapped the roof thoughtfully. I sat on the edge of the cot and felt it give under me. I breathed shallowly because the air felt thick with old breath. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, and it came out more like a plea than a reproach. He said, "If I told you, they'd come for you," he said. The words faster now, as if they were trying to catch up to having been inside him so long. He said, "You'd be in danger." He said, they were listening. He said, if anything happened to him, I had to wait. He said you'd find the boat. He said, "Bluebird." He said, "Remember the word." "Jesus," I breathed. I stood up because sitting felt like submission. I turned on the lamp. The little cabin looked back at me with the bland kindness of rooms. I walked to the counter and set my hand on the French press as if I could meet him in the last thing he touched. "Has he been here since?" I asked. "Did you see him?" Noah's face turned toward the door. Twice. He said, "Soon." He said, "There was a man." He said, "Don't be scared." He said, "He loves us." He said, "He's sorry." A laugh burst out of me, ugly as a tear. I put my hand over my mouth. I didn't want to laugh at my child carrying this. I wanted to laugh at the audacity of a man who can break something and then apologize to the broken thing for being sharp. "What did he take?" I asked. "From us." Noah swallowed. "The brown envelope from the gray file thing, the car title, the compass, the emergency cash. He said he'd bring it back. He said, just until the weekend." "How long did he say?" My voice broke gently on the last word. "2 days, he said." He held up the peace sign again with 2 fingers. The gesture made my eyes hot. "2 days," he repeated softly, and that the number had turned into a curse in his mouth made me want to tear the boat up plank by plank. I sat down again and looked at my son, my child, the boy with my father's eyes and his father's hands, the boy who had swallowed a secret to keep me safe, the boy who had turned silence into protection. I felt pride and fury, grief and gratitude, love as a crushing thing and a buoy. I reached for him, and he came to me, and we stood with the boat moving under us and the rain beating its hands on the roof, and I murmured into his hair, "We know now. You don't have to hold this alone." He nodded against my shoulder. "I couldn't say," he whispered. "If I said it, it would be real." "It's been real the whole time," I said. "Your mouth isn't a door that keeps the world out. It's a window that lets the right people in." We took the keys. We took the burner phone. We took the dog's collar from the hook where someone had hung it like a joke, and I slipped it into my pocket the way you pocket-proof. We locked the cabin behind us and walked back out into the rain. On the way home, I called Ruby. She answered on the second ring and said, "I'm dressed. I have bail money. Tell me where to meet you." Because sisters are prophets that way. "At home," I said. "It's him. He's been on a boat." "Of course he has," she said, the way a woman says of course to a thing that is both predictable and still a surprise. "Do not go alone again. I'm on my way." We sat at the kitchen table with the evidence of something we didn't want to believe laid out like a still life. Keys with a seagull, a phone that had said one thing that mattered, a drawing of a boat. The dog lay under the table sighing like a parent. The house listened, as it has always listened, and the rain made the window look like it wanted to cry for us. "What do we do?" Noah asked, his voice hoarse with newness. He had used it for one word and then for 70. And now we had to be careful with it, like a muscle that's been idle too long. We tell the truth, I said. We tell it to the right people. We tell it to ourselves first. We did. We went to Dr. Levin the next morning, and I said the word, bluebird, and the sentence, he made Noah promise, and the paragraph, he owes people, and the chapter, he's been living on a boat. And Dr. Levin nodded as if we'd finally found a sentence in a book she'd been waiting to show us. We're going to talk to the police, she said gently, and we're going to show them the boat. We did. They met us at the marina. The rain had lessened to a mist that made everyone look dreamt. An officer touched the keys like they were holy. He read the name on the stern aloud. Bluebird, he said softly, and the way he said it made me like him. He went inside with a partner. They came back out with faces that had to pretend they had a distance from us. We'll dust for prints, he said. There are coffee grounds. Recent use. We'll look. They looked. I looked too, in all the ways I could look. Through our accounts, at the pile of mail, he'd always been the one to sort. Into the corners of closets where people keep their ghosts. I found 4 payday loan letters that looked like spam until you read the small print and felt your stomach come out of your body and run away. I found a receipt from a pawn shop for his watch. The one my father had given him on our 10th anniversary. The one with the constellation on the face. I always thought looked pretentious. And now, it just looked like a memory skeleton. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to drape my hate over him like a tarp, practical and covering. But also, I remembered him young, more hair, softer worry. The way he'd learned to rock the bassinet at 3 a.m. until his calf ached. The way he'd built Noah's first treehouse in the yard with a half-broken ladder and a stubborn calm. The way he'd laughed when I told him the baby had hiccups in the middle of the night, and I couldn't sleep because the sound was too cute to be restful. People don't vanish their goodness when they do harm. That's what makes it unbearable. Days collected again, but different now because the silence had been broken by one word, and once words come out of hiding, they start collecting friends. Noah spoke in small bursts and then in longer ones, like learning a song backwards. He didn't tell me everything at once. He would say he smelled like gas that night, and then 2 days later he would say, he told me the name of a man, Gus or Russ. And then a week later, in the middle of breakfast, he would say, I heard a voice on the boat that night. It wasn't Dad's. And we would pause our spoons mid-air and sit in that truth like a sudden rain. We went to the marina every few days. Sometimes I stood on the dock and stared at the boat until anger rose like a tide and then receded. Sometimes Noah lay on the deck and looked at the sky through the toothpick mass and, perhaps, spoke quietly to a father who wasn't there. Once, I saw him take out his phone and put it back. I pretended not to notice. People deserve private pockets. The police called to say they had found Mark's car in a parking garage on the east side, dust thick on its hood. The camera at the entrance had captured his car going in and someone else walking out 2 hours later, head down, a jacket pulled up. Unclear, unhelpful. They asked if he had any enemies. I almost laughed. Everyone has enemies. Most of us keep them to ourselves. What broke the case open? If that's even what you call it, when something opens and what spills out is both stench and blessing. was a man named Russ who wasn't a man named Russ. He was a man named Raphael. He called the burner phone. I had kept it charged. I don't know why. It felt like tending a small, mean plant you hope might one day unfold a flower. "Bluebird," he said when I answered, his voice like gravel polished in someone's pocket. "You still keeping her warm?" I swallowed. "Who is this?" "I'm a friend of your husband's," he said, and said friend, like a word with quotation marks. "Tell him the time for favors is over. If he's not at slip 11 by midnight on Friday, we collect our interest another way. I hear architects have pretty wives. The world went out and came back. I felt it. The way your vision sometimes does when you stand up too fast." "He's not here," I said. "I am." A pause. "Even better," he said. "You tell your man I called. You tell him the bluebird sings tonight." He hung up. I sat in the kitchen with the phone heavy in my hand and the dog leaning against my shin and the house listening. I breathed in through my nose and out through my mouth like Dr. Levin taught me, like an idiot in a storm. I called the police. They came. They nodded in that way of theirs. They asked to wire the boat. The idea of the boat wearing a wire made me oddly sorry, like dressing a proud old thing in a hospital gown. But I said yes. They asked if I wanted to be somewhere else on Friday night. I said no. They looked at Noah. I said, "He's not going." They both nodded, relief like a tide in their faces. I didn't ask if that was because he was a minor or because they couldn't bear one more boy held together with fishing line. Friday came like a dare. I made lasagna from one of the aluminum pans, still lingering in the back of the fridge from that first week. It probably had a life of its own now. I baked it until the whole house smelled like false comfort and butter, and we ate it at the table, like people in a movie trying to pretend they're not about to be in a different movie. At 11:40, I kissed Noah's forehead the way you kiss a little boy before he goes to sleep. He flinched at the childishness and then leaned into it. "Stay with Aunt Ruby," I said. "If Dad calls, say nothing. Give the phone to Ruby and lock the door." He nodded. He looked at me with a plea that made my heart fold in on itself. "Be careful," he said, and his voice broke on careful. The word sounded exactly like the first day I brought him home from the hospital, when he made a sound that was almost a cry and almost a laugh, and I thought, "I will never protect you from everything, and I will die trying." I went to the marina with 2 police cars following, at a distance. Lights off. I parked crooked. I've forgotten how to park straight when my life is like this. It was a quiet night. The rain had gone to bother other people. The moon hung up tired. I walked to slip 11 with my hands in my pockets and my heart everywhere. Bluebird waited. I stepped aboard and sat in the cabin. I turned on the lamp. I laid the keys on the table like I was dealing cards to an adversary who hadn't shown up yet. The wire taped to the underside of the table felt like a small betrayal. And then I remembered the large betrayals and felt better. At exactly midnight, a footstep on the dock. 2. A man ducked into the cabin and filled it. He was bigger than I expected. Most men who call themselves Raphael and leave messages like that are smaller. It's a biblical irony. The most dangerous men are often the ones who don't try to frighten you by size. He had a face like a hand that had been broken and set slightly wrong. He smiled without interest. "You're not Mark," he said. No, I said. I'm the woman he used to love. He laughed. He sat. He put his hands on the table the way he must have put them on men's chests in alleys, casually. Where is he? He asked with polite boredom. If I knew, I said, you and I wouldn't be having this charming conversation. He looked around as if the cabin might cough up my husband. He owes us, he said. We extended grace. Grace has an expiration date. I thought of lasagnas and old French presses and the smell of gasoline. I thought of my son, designed on table in a hospital, made of our hope and the math of inheritance. I thought of how terrified Mark must have been, and how stupid, and how very, very much a man in over his head can destroy with just his hands. How much? I asked. He raised an eyebrow. You negotiating? Yes, I said, with nothing. It's my best tactic. Humor me. 72, he said, with interest. $72,000 might as well have been 72 planets. I nodded, as if this were a price one could discuss. What did he do? I asked. Gamble? Drugs. Drugs are stupid, he said. Gambling is a hobby of people who can afford to lose. Your man bought a little dream from the wrong people. A property, a flip, what do you call it? Starter dream. He used other people's money to float it. It sank. Who are you? I asked softly, not because I didn't know, but because sometimes you make people say it. Someone who will collect, he said. He leaned in and smiled, all mint, like a man who believes in the hygiene of his menace. If it's not him, then... He let the sentence walk around the room and choose something to sit on. It sat on me. I don't have that money, I said. He left us with beans and a dog who needs dental work. He laughed again. He had a nice laugh, like a joke that doesn't involve everyone in the room. I'm not a monster, he said, which is a sentence monsters love. We've been patient. It's time to be creative. Creative, I echoed, and wished I had brought a weapon besides my language. He stood. Tell him the bluebird is no longer a nest. It's a bill. He reached for the keys. I put my hand over them without thinking, and his eyes flicked to my hand in that way men have when they are calculating who taught you to be that brave. I'm calling the police, I said, which was a performance for The Wire. He smiled, and I realized he knew. This conversation never happened, he said, lightly. You never met me. Tell your boy I like his drawings. He left. My whole body shook the way a dog shakes after a bath. The police drifted in, their questions like coats I didn't have the energy to put on. I told them what he had said. They nodded again, their job a series of nods towards suffering. They told me to be careful. I told them to do their job. We were all so polite. The moon watched and shrugged. We went home. Noah was awake on the couch, eyes red but dry, chin stubborn. He stood when I walked in and looked for my limbs, my eyes, my breath. Seeing me whole allowed him to breathe again. He came to me, and I held his head in both my hands and kissed his forehead lightly, the way my grandmother used to do when she wanted to give you her strength through her lips. 2 days later, Mark called. He didn't call my phone or the house phone. He called the burner. I had almost stopped keeping it charged. Almost. I answered with my heart either opening or closing. Hard to tell which. Claire, he said. Hearing my name in his mouth was like stepping into sunlight after a long tunnel and finding you're on a cliff. Where? I said evenly. Are you? He exhaled, a bad exhale, the kind with cigarettes baked in. I'm close, he said. I can't come home. No, I said. You can't. I can make it right, he said. And I laughed, and he flinched. You can hear a flinch on the phone if you've loved the person flinching long enough. You put our son in your secrets, I said. You asked him to hold his mother together with silence. You asked a 16-year-old to be your safe. I had to. No, I said, so quietly the phone had to lean in to hear it. You wanted to. He was quiet. He was the quiet that happens when the person on the other end is building a sentence carefully because they know it will have to hold their weight. I didn't want them to hurt you, he said. You hurt us to keep us from being hurt, I said. Do you hear yourself? I thought I had 2 days, he said. He said it like a child. Here is the candy wrapper in my hand. The dog ate my homework. I thought the world would be kinder than it is. You had 16 years, I said, and you asked for 2 days. Claire, he said, and my name in his mouth again made something in me undo. I leaned against the counter because I needed the counter to be real. I made a mistake. You made a series, I said. You built a life out of them. I'm going to the police, he said suddenly, surprising us both. I'm going to tell them. I can't keep this. Why? I asked. Now? Because, he said, and his voice broke in two. Noah doesn't deserve to be the man I'm making him. Oh, the right sentence. The sentence you wait for. The sentence that is both confession and medicine. Where are you? I said again. At the marina, he said. In the lot? I'm Bluebird. Stay, I said, and hung up and grabbed my keys and said to Noah, come on, and said to the dog, stay, and said to the house, hold. We drove. The city paid attention. The traffic said it would help if it could. The lights all turned green like a benevolent god was on duty. He stood by the fence, thinner and older, and something else I couldn't name. He wore a jacket I didn't recognize and shoes he would never have chosen when he had a choice. His hair had flecks of something I wanted to call dignity, and couldn't yet. He saw us. He didn't move. He lifted a hand, not waving, not signaling, just letting it be seen. Noah got out first. He walked toward his father like a person approaches a stranger who has the face of someone you used to love. He stopped an arm's length away. He looked. He didn't speak. His silence now was a thing he owned, not a thing that owned him. I'm sorry, Mark said, and the sentence was both true and insufficient. He looked at me. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He offered his wrists like a man who has finally understood the exchange rate. Go with me, he said softly, to me or to the police car pulling in, or to the version of himself who had finally sat down in his own life. We'll meet you there, I said. We'll tell the truth. The officer who had first taken our report months ago was one of the ones who arrived. He looked at Mark, at me, at Noah, at the boat, whose name he now said like a family member. Bluebird, he murmured, and then, more professionally, Mr. Curry, you're under arrest for... And the list of mistakes dressed as charges began. Mark didn't resist. He became small and polite. He passed Noah as they guided him into the car. He looked at his son with something like awe that he had made a person who could stand in front of him with his back that straight. "I love you," he said. Noah lifted 2 fingers. 2 days, 2 people, 2 truths. Peace, goodbye. He didn't translate. He didn't need to. The legal part was what it always is: expensive, slow, full of papers with bad fonts, rooms that smell like other people's fear, coffee that tastes like regret. He pled to what he could. He told the truth where it helped others and kept his mouth shut where his lawyers told him to. He gave names that gave other names that built a ladder out of a pit the city had been trying to fill with prayers. We lost things. We lost the house. Dreams aren't collateral. Banks accept, and mistakes are. We sold the furniture that reminded me of smarter days. We found a smaller place with a balcony that lets us pretend we are rich in air. I took extra shifts, teaching night classes to people who looked at me the way I had once looked at women trying to hold too many truths in a room not big enough. We learned how to find nice things at thrift stores and how to be grateful with less and how to have grief and a sense of humor at the same time without setting the house on fire. Noah kept talking, carefully. He liked verbs now. He preferred to say what people did rather than what they felt. He chose, he'd say, and then, after a beat, I choose. And watching him line his life with choices made me want to build a monument out of cereal boxes and glue. He drew. He drew less of boats and more of rooms that made room for everyone in them. He started a small class at the community center, Saturday mornings, 10 to noon, teaching little kids how to draw what they wish a room could hold. "A trapdoor for bad dreams," one little girl said, and he drew it for her so carefully I had to turn away. We visited Mark in prison once, then twice, then not again, because it was both too much and not enough. He sat across from us with a face trying to learn how to be ordinary and failed. He asked Noah about school, and Noah told him about drawings. He asked me about work, and I told him about beans. He said he was sorry so many times the word lost its edges. He didn't ask for us to wait. He didn't get mad when I said we wouldn't. On the day he was sentenced, the courtroom smelled like paper and pens that had been held by too many hands. The judge read the words the law reads. People looked at us the way people look at families being reorganized by strangers. He turned once before they took him through the door, and he met my eyes. And in that one look, we forgave the versions of each other we had imagined and said goodbye to the versions we had survived. We still go to the marina sometimes. The boat is gone. Raphael, was arrested the same spring as Mark. The Bluebird was impounded and then, later, donated to a program that teaches city kids how to balance on water. Sometimes I like to think of girls standing on the deck where I sat with fear and learning how to walk on something that will always move. We keep the key with the seagull on the red float on a hook by the door. Because not all keys need locks. Some keys need to be reminders. We hung the drawing Noah made on the wall by the kitchen table. He titled it, which is new for him, in neat block letters at the bottom. The day I said, Bluebird. He and I have developed a language that is ours. Sometimes it's words. Sometimes it's orchids. He started buying me small plants because flowers die too dramatically, and he wants things that try to live. We name them silly things like Reginald and Boo. We clap when they unfold. I don't know if I'll ever marry again. Love now feels like a room with windows I can open. If someone comes and stands in that room with me and doesn't mind the draft, I'll make us tea. If not, the room is already mine. When people ask about the silent months, I tell them the truth. Silence was a bridge my son built out of fear and held together with love. The first word he put back on his tongue changed everything, not because it was the right word, but because he chose to say it. Bluebird. Such a small sound. Such a heavy wing. This is not the life I imagined under the fig tree with vows written on napkins. It is, however, a life. It is full of beans and good drawings and bad jokes and plants named after British men. It is smaller and kinder than the one before. It requires less pretending. It is made of mornings where the kettle clicks off and a boy says, "Mom," and that is a cathedral. We watch baseball games muted still sometimes. Not because we're sad, but because we like the way the players' mouths make shapes we invent meanings for. We say our own lines. We narrate our own innings. We don't wait for someone else to tell us when to cheer. The last time we went to the marina in late summer, the water was a sheet slipped smooth on a bed. The mass made knitting needles against the sky. A little girl in a life jacket saluted us from the deck of a small boat that will never know the name I can't stop tasting. The boy teaching her how to stand the way you stand, when everything under you is moving, had hair the color of my son's when he hadn't yet learned to be unhappy. "Ready?" Noah asked, somewhere behind me, meaning ready to walk back to the car, ready to buy 2 sour lemonade from the stand. A teenager runs, in a way that makes me want to hand him a kingdom. Ready to live. Ready can be so many things. "Ready," I said, and we stepped off the dock together. The world giving, the world holding, the world exactly as you tell it to be when you finally decide to speak. Tired of chaos at home? Unlock simple, practical parenting tips to create a calm and loving vibe. Since 2010, Parenting Simply has been your community for connecting with your kids and mastering easy skills to transform your home. Our mission: slash stress for parents and kids with powerful communication and organizational hacks. Say goodbye to doom and gloom. Parenting can be fun, joyful, and fulfilling. You've got what it takes to be an amazing, loving parent, and we'll show you how. Click the link below for stress-free parenting tools and join our community. Dive into stories that stir your soul. Jackie Smith. Stories is your daily haven for raw emotions, courageous women, and authentic true life narratives. We weave tales of hope, strength, dreams, and the quiet miracles of everyday life. Our stories inspire, uplift, and remind you you're never alone. Subscribe now to experience a fresh, heartfelt chapter every day that sparks wonder and connection. Join our community and be part of the journey.